Good afternoon, students, to whichever part of the globe you belong to. I am Professor Dinesh Kusai, would be in the forthcoming session and the sessions put together for the course of event. We would be discussing on one of the areas as far as our management course is concerned is on business environment. So we'll be discussing this throughout. I think we will be spreading this course around sessions around 5 to around 7 sessions or so. Now, a brief outlay before we actually get in as far as the module is concerned or the session is concerned. Number one is, now in a normal classroom kind of physical environment, when we take this session, we kind of spend around 20 hours or so, 16 to 20 hours or so. But yeah, since it's an online medium, so we slightly compress and condense it into around 7 to 8 lectures of 2 hours each. And we discuss important relevant points in the subject, elaborate it, elicit it, describe with examples as well, so that it's a good knowledge sharing platform. And we make it as simplified as possible so that we are at a common page. Yet at any point of time during the lecture you have some queries about it, what you can do is you note down your queries and write it back to us at ISBM. That's number one. And since we also understand that this is a 2-hour lecture in one go, and that also is a big time advantage as far as our online lecture is concerned, is at any point of time, if you are seeing this recorded version of the lecture, what you can do is you take a pause in between, you can go for a break and come back as well. So that's another advantage of e-learning, as what ISBM gives to you to upgrade your knowledge and skills. Great. So coming back to our session as far as business environment is concerned, students and friends, let's also understand the mere fact that the times that we are living in, the environment that we are living in, when we look into any organization, any businesses to run these days, poses different challenges and requires different kind of strategizing, planning, execution for different types of companies and different sector of companies. So being students, for being the future CEOs of any of your organization, when we want to become or run businesses for organization, we also need to understand what kind of business environment all companies are going through, and we as future CEOs of the organization need to also know how are we going to combat that. So we'll make this session accordingly and look into what are the various parameters that influences current businesses that exist. Great. So on this first lecture in the coming 2 hours, we will kind of lay the platform of our forthcoming sessions as well when we speak of business environment. So let's see what we will be going through. Now when I say session content, it's not only about the coming 2 hours, but this is what we'll be addressing in the coming around 10 to 14 hours or so, as you look into. One, in the introduction, we will look into the contemporary scenario of businesses that exist, nature of modern businesses, how the traditional form of business was there and how it is currently pitched in. We'll also look in the economic factors. Now, students, let me tell you upfront, when we speak of business environment, there are various factors that influence businesses. So, normally, what people assume or presume to be are the factors that influences business. People restrict their assumption till maybe resource, maybe money, maybe infrastructure, maybe customers. But there are much more other things as well which we'll learn into and look into when we are speaking of business environment. So the economic factors, the socio-cultural factors. Now, with the growing emergence of transnational companies or multinational companies, where companies are based and operated under various locations across the globe, we need to understand that companies, wherever they are based in, they need to pick up and be flexible to these socio-cultural environment as well. So that is also something that we'll take up separately as we move in. The technological factors, when here we speak about the IT support structure, the logistic support structure, the technological upgradation of whichever base location the country exists in. The fundamentals that we will look into throughout these sessions would be scope and subject matter of macroeconomics. So we'll look into the macro level dynamics that affect a business function. We'll also look into introduction of economics of growth and development, how over a period of time, with the growing emergence of worldwide global economy and which kind of penetrate each other as well, how that has started influencing current businesses. We look into the concept of HDI as we move in. We look into the economic systems, where we look into the macroeconomic environment of the business. We look into also from a national context in this heading. We look into the economic fluctuations that exist, how the NSE, BSE or any of these stock market exchanges influences business function, how elections, since these days are times of elections, how elections also influences. So we look into the political influence on business functions, the economic indicators or indices that affect businesses, the macroeconomic policies. So when the policies like maybe an RBI guidelines or SEBI guidelines or IRDA guidelines that kind of sets pitch for any kind of fiscal or monetary measures, how are these bylaws and laws going to affect the business function? Also when how the budgets influence businesses as well, because they set in the political framework of doing business in any particular country. The federal budget, so when we look into the GDP of a nation, how budgetary allocation of funds of the government also influences the type of business you're doing. The financial economic environment of business, that includes the Indian financial system, we will look into at some depth at some point of time. The financial markets that exist, the current trends in banking, because banking gives the kind of infrastructural backup that is required for any business function to grow and evolve. We'll also look into the industrial environment. So what kind of industrial policies that existed right from 1991 to date. We look into the privatization and disinvestment. So when India surged ahead in 1991 into the liberalization era, when economies were thrown open for a new world order in terms of economic revolution, how those is affecting business functions. We look into industrial sickness as well. We'll look into at some point of time the public sector units as well playing their parts. A role of small scale industries. So when we speak of SSIs, which roughly contributes to 40 to 55% of the GDP. Now, generally when people speak of companies, they speak of bigger companies. If you're speaking from an Indian context, people speak of Tata's, Reliance, Godrej, so on and so forth. But we also need to understand that 40 to 55% of GDP comes from SSIs, or that's small scale industry that exist at a very large base spread across different states. We look into the India and the world, so we look into one from a national context and how from a national context we relate to the international context. That's about the world. So there we look into the technological transfer, the multinational companies. So we look into how with the post-liberalization era, how the competition has shifted, how it has the market rules has changed, how things have differed and varied in the last 2 decades or so. Strategies for going global. So we speak about, from an Indian context, we speak about global. So global is about thinking globally and acting locally. So how, from an Indian perspective, the companies, if they need to go to the next level or the higher level, or when the playing arena shifts gear to a global scale, what things the company needs to take care of when they are going global. The foreign investments that are there. We speak about also the India and the WTO, or World Trade Organization Pact, that impacts businesses, and the economic integration. When we speak of economic integration, we say that it's not about when at some point of time when industries were isolated, when impact of industries didn't penetrate each other or not influenced each other. So the new world order of business or doing businesses have changed significantly. So when we say a telecom industry and a coal industry or a petroleum industry, they might be distinctly separate, but with integration of businesses across the globe and nationally as well, they have kind of integrated together, and they do influence every business. Say for example, increase in petrol prices. It might be a petroleum industry business, but it's going to impact every other business. Now petroleum is something that we relate. We know that if petroleum prices are going to go up, we know the vegetable prices are going to go up, the food prices are going to go up. But that's something more tangible. But students, we need to understand that all businesses have effects on each other, because every business is integrated into each other and they influence each other. And the tangible things could not be looked into because there are lots of intangible. For a common person, they can't figure you out. So it's about the bio-eco-diversity that exists within the integrated model. So this is what we will be looking into in our coming around 6 to 7 sessions that will be speaking on business environment. So let's start with the basics about understanding right from the core and getting to different levels. So number one, so let's understand what is the business. Now when we the module itself or the session itself, when we say of business, so what is the business? So when we say business is understood as organized effort of enterprises to supply consumer with goods and service for a profit. Now when we speak of business, 2 things are important as far as this definition is concerned. Number one is it's a supply of consumers, one, goods and services, important part of business, and they do it for profits. Now we need to understand the purpose of doing a business. Definitely the main crux lies on profit. Now profit is the incentive that the entrepreneur or the organization or the company derives from it. Now, and profit is so very essential It's the economic engine of any organization. Now, we don't say at this point of time that profits are the only motive or should be the only motive of organization, but profits form a very important aspect of running a business. Now, when we say profit, we need to understand that profits are not something that a company gets by selling its goods or services. Profits, we need to understand, are something that is a net that is balanced out from what they sold to the cost they have incurred. Now, when we say selling a product or service means the revenue that the organization generated or got from the customers, that's one, and the organization is to deduct the cost price of the product or services in terms of maybe buying a product or manufacturing a product, the salaries, the add-on expenses, the logistics, the so and so forth, and the net that balanced out becomes the profit. Now, profit is something that all organizations strive for, and we know that since we are speaking about business environment, everything that an entrepreneur, an organization look forward as a more tangible thing that to look forward is what kind of profits the company has earned, isn't it? So when you pick up your newspaper and you figure it out, okay, quarter 2 results of TCS has been so and so, up or down. ICICI results for this quarter is so and so, up or down. Now that also means that is a reflection or tangible of profits, and that's so very much a measurement tool for organization to explore. So when we speaking of business environment, we are also speaking, in other words, how the environment is influencing the profits, means increasing, decreasing, stable, whatever. And as a marketing manager, we need to understand how they are going to impact the profits of an organization. Great. Now, when we say of contemporary business goals or the contemporary traditional business goals or traditional model on which the business existed and thrived and strived upon was this. Number one, much of thrust was definitely profits, the bottom line, the net figure from the gross to the actual. People looked into growth as well. Now, growth here means vis-a-vis last year, how have you fared? The market leadership, so we also, a contemporary model also spoke about the presence of your market. That means what kind of market share people have. So when we speak of biscuit industry for that matter, or confectionery industry for that matter, so when we speak of Parle and Britannia, so it's not only about profit but also about gaining market share. Now, gaining market share is also something that the companies strive for. Now, people speak about market leadership. That's also on the tangible that people look forward to. The customer satisfaction. So, the traditional business goals definitely focused on making the customer satisfied and happy. The employee satisfaction. So, here the traditional model also spoke about that the internal employee is also a customer, as Richard Branson of Virginia Airlines always speaks about, that you make the internal customer, that means the employee, happy, they will take care of the external employee. So the employee satisfaction, the stakeholders who are working within the organization. The quality products and services. So it's also about when we spoke about in the 80s and 90s the emergence of Sony, Panasonic, all Japan-based companies who who when they installed the process of Kaizen and Six Sigma and improved on processes where they kept on evolving the finer distinctions when we spoke of quality measures. So definitely about giving finer quality products and services, and also there was an element of service to society. So this traditional model existed in the sense also that it is also kind of service to society. When organizations are growing, organization also thought about how they can contribute. So every organization, if you check their websites out, or if you yourself are working for an organization, you will understand that there is also a initiative called the CSR initiative, or the initiative where we call it a corporate social responsibility. So when we speak about corporate social responsibility, it's a corporate word, but signifying or highlighting the importance of giving back to society. So when we speak of profits is what the company gets from the marketplace, and believe that they want to also give it back to society in some form or the other. So it could be a CSR initiative, it could be about plantation, preparing gardens or recreational gardens or age-old homes, orphanages. So this is a way of service to society, or building hospitals, corporate hospitals. So this is a contemporary business goal that existed, and this contemporary business goals that we have kind of spoken about in a nutshell existed for around 50 years or so, say around from 1970s to maybe around 2000 or so. But we all know that this definition of businesses keeps on changing, because business itself is dynamic, because the environment is dynamic. So let's look in also the characteristics of business, the modern characteristics of business, how these days it has started influencing these factors. And these factors, which we will look into one by one, to start off, one is change. Now, when we speak of any business characteristics, we need to look into change, because we spoke about the dynamic nature of business. Two, the large size of business. Now, businesses, when they grow, they kind of expand to all levels. Say for example, let's take an example of a company like say like Reliance. Now Reliance might have started with petrochemical unit, as we all know, then moved on to textiles, then retail, so many elements, energy, telecom. So the large size of business. So when businesses are kind of exploding into all dimensions, we also need to understand what are the possible implications when we speak from a business environment context exist. Then we have diversification that we spoke about a couple of minutes back, where you take another example. Say if we want Tata's, right from Tata Motors, Tata Energy, Tata Telecommunications, we have so many, Tata Chemicals, and so on and so forth. So companies have been diversified, and it's not only about bigger names. Even if you have smaller names as well, but they tend to diversify to different sectors. And this diversification is based on the philosophy or logic that you don't keep all your eggs in one basket. I repeat, you don't keep all your eggs in one basket, for the simple reason that if any business environment is going to affect a specific environment or specific industry, you find industries or companies getting packed off, isn't it? I mean, So fast we can find certain companies get knocked off. You take an examples of Enron. You take an examples of so many companies which get wrapped up very fast because they didn't had their presence felt in a particular industry, and some kind of turmoil or turbulence happens in a particular industry, it kind of has a roll-off effect on the entire industry per se. So diversification helps to kind of match up these things as well. Then is globalization. So when we speak about characteristics of business today, we can never forget the impact of globalization. Then the technological revolution, that they say in every 10 years the technological upgradation actually doubles. So that means the impact also is huge. The information age, now we are living in an information age. Now right from the era when we started off with industrial revolution, then we moved on to manufacturing practices, and then today we are living in an absolute information age where people can communicate so freely with each other as well. And then we know as all these dynamics come in, we know that it's also an age of competition. That means that there are bigger fishes as well in the same pond. So we have seen this influence of bigger fishes eating the smaller ones, and need not necessarily has to be the same function. It could be any of those functions. That also means that there's an era of competition that we live in. Then the government control. We know that every organization has, in whichever location they are based or operates in, has to comply with the government norms that exist out there. Now that includes the policies, the budgets, the regulations, the licensing, so on and so forth. So these all impact the characteristics of business, and we'll try to look into these aspects in some length. Okay, so first the Indian companies, the Fortune 500 companies. Now let me tell you what does Fortune 500 means. The Fortune 500 is a benchmark or a specification based on which certain companies are measured, and there are different measurement tools that it uses to come into the Fortune 500 list. Now the measurements include the kind of revenue the company generates, the kind of profit margin the company has, the number of employees, the spread it has across. These are a few things. So 8 Indian companies have made it into the Fortune 500 list in 2015, and these are IOC, Indian Oil Corporation, Reliance Industries, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Bharat Petroleum BP, Hindustan Petroleum, State Bank of India, and ONGC. So a lot of petroleum companies featuring out there, showing the importance of petroleum as an industry. So right from HP, BP, in Reliance industry also, Reliance Petroleum contributes a lot in terms of chunk of contribution, and we have ONGC in refinery business as well. So these are the 8 Indian companies that feature in the Fortune 500 list. So that also means that from an Indian context or perspective, that companies are growing, evolving, and reaching out and expanding as well. The League of 500 Elite Companies for 2015 is topped by US. So major companies in this Fortune 500 list is topped by US. Retailers like Walmart, followed by oil giant Royal Dutch Shell, and another oil major Exxon Mobil in that order. Now a total of 54 Chinese companies made it into that list, and this year out of which 3 are in Fortune 10 list. So a lot of Chinese companies are also being reflected, and that also speaks about the kind of economics uh, the country has. So why we are showing this list? We are showing this list to show how, from an Indian standpoint of view, how companies also have been evolving and excelling as well. And since we have to look into the context as well, we also speak about that even countries like China, which didn't had made a major presence maybe 50 years back, had started making it presence. Now we all know China is a big industry. Now it's not called it's not called a country; it's called an industry because the kind of ducts they manufacture deliver at a bare minimum prices, and this speaks volumes about what I'm saying of. Now let's look at the top 10 list of this Fortune 500. It's an interesting list. So on one side we have the company name. We also have the revenues that the companies generate. We also have the profits in millions. Profits in millions. Now we need to understand why this profits in millions is mentioned. It speaks about the size and the volume of the organization. Now, if you see Walmart, now volume by volume, if you see Walmart really tops it over. Now, with 14,335 million dollar. Now, if you want to convert that into a billion, that accounts to 14 billion dollar revenue annually, and that's profit. We are not speaking of the gross revenue, and that's some size. And if you see Royal Dutch Shell, 12 billion, ExxonMobil, 19 billion, BP, 16, Toyota Motors, then we have Japan Post Holdings, Sinopec, we have State Grid, AXA. The AXA here is the Bharti AXA group that we have. It's a London-based insurance company, more than 200 years old. And we have the China National Petroleum, which is a co-equivalent of Bharat Petroleum, BP, which also has around 10 billion dollar profits. So these are the top 10 companies. Now, why we are also showing this, students understand that even as students, we should be aware of what kind of, who are the top 10 companies, maybe by revenue, maybe by penetration, maybe by size, maybe by employees. So this list gives a good understanding about the sizes of the company as well. Government control. Now the factors, the characteristics of businesses that we spoke about, we'll speak about each of these in one by one. So when we speak of government control, to correct market failures in case of externalities. Now, the sole reason why a government intervention is needed for any businesses is that in case of failures of if suppose the business is just thrown open without any intervention by the government, there might be a good chance of hoarding might happen, just like we see onion hoardings when certain middlemen just hold the stock just to increase their profit levels of onion. So we find the onion prices soaring up. So this is one example that I'm quoting is these are the interventions that government wants to control, where businesses are run on equal footing, where things become fairer in terms of competition. So government intervention is required to failure of any externalities. Government intervention is also to create stable business conditions. It is to stimulate aggregate demand through monetary and fiscal regulation. So you want a stable business condition as well. So we don't want an environment where where businesses might happen, but the richer are getting more richer and the poorer are getting more poorer. So we're looking at some stable kind of system where things become fairer by competition. Certain products are kept in such a fashion, like basic food items, like for example salt. Salt has a ceiling price, which any company can't sell it above a certain price. Now, because we call this the Essential Commodities Act, which is a government control. Now, essential commodities are being specified, right, from onion, potatoes, then we have oil, salt. So these are the ingredients that are essential for every household. So the intention here is that companies, in the name of making profit, should not intervene to provide public goods. So when we speak about rationing from an Indian context, where people provide certain goods at discounted prices, right from when we have the the LPG cylinders used for cooking gas, it is given at a subsidized price to certain cross section of people who are economically backward. Even prices of rice, even prices of certain grains are made discounted so that the poor can also afford it and make it more viable. Diversification as a growth strategy. I have mentioned in my earlier in my talk couple of minutes back that if companies need to grow, prosper, excel, it just can't do with sticking to only one domain. And that's precisely the reason you will find, and that's also part of the marketing presentation that you must have gone through, that one of the growth strategies for organization is to diversify. The diversification could be of products, it could be of the markets, it could be of the services. So we need to diversify. So when we say of diversification, here diversification strategies are used to expand firms' operation by adding markets. Either you go to a different market altogether, or adding products or services, or stages of production to the existing businesses. So we increase this portfolio or array of operations to different set of customers that we go through. When the new venture is strategically related to the existing line of businesses, it is called concentric diversification. So two levels of diversification happen. So one level is, say for example, if a company is manufacturing toothpaste and they have an existing range of toothpaste. Now, if a company thinks that within the toothpaste category they can expand it maybe to the types of toothpaste that they have. It could be added with charcoal, it could be with the new gel, it could be the Ayurvedic toothpaste. So it could be a mouth rinsener as well. So that becomes a concentric. That means they already have, a company have an existing business product. They want to add up to the pipeline, or we call the breadth of the brand. So when we do that, we have a concentric diversification. The other is a conglomerate diversification, wherein it occurs when there is no relationship between the new and the old line of businesses. The new and the old businesses are unrelated. For example, now this toothpaste manufacturing company, when we speak of conglomerate diversification, it means it has now thought about making toys as well. Now, toys and toothpaste are very unrelated businesses. Yes or no? So this is a diversification. We will find lot of companies as they emerge through, they diversify in different aspects, and The simple reason why diversification helps businesses is because they helps to absorb economic shock. And very important point to understand. Diversification helps to absorb economic shock. Now, what does economic shock mean? Economic shock means that sometimes certain business areas or certain business functions might not do well because of economic turndown. It could be political turmoil, it could be socio-cultural factors, so many of them, we never know. But when these kind of turmoil exist, then it is so very difficult to sustain. So what conglomerate diversification provides and gives is it can divert revenues from other business houses and give it to some other business houses. So for example, when we speak about Kingfisher these days, not with high regards, but when we speak of Kingfisher itself, so we know as an airline industry, it has gone bankrupt, it declared a bankrupt as well. So the only way Kingfisher could come out of this mess is by diversification of their funds from a brewery and liquor industry and repaying back to the banks to which they owe them from the airline industry. Now imagine if Kingfisher was only in airline industry, it might be game over, isn't it? But you know the company exists, and it's because of diversification that they had through. So diversification helps to absorb shock. Now students, we need to understand that we are living in a times of uncertainties. Uncertainties because of technological revolution, uncertainties because of so many factors that exist. So these uncertainties, if we need to match up, if we need to combat, we need to diversify, and that's the point about it. So diversification forms a growth strategy as well. Now diversification could be either vertical or horizontal. Now vertical integration. Now vertical is this way. Vertical integration occurs when firms undertake operation at different stages of production, where they integrate in such a way different stages of production gets integrated, and that's also a diversification. Or when a firm diversifies closer to the sources of a raw material in the stages of production, it is following a backward vertical integration strategy. Suppose if the organization moves into where the source is available, for example a thermal power plant, you know, for thermal power plant the source is coal mining or coal areas where coals are mined. So if a company moves to the places where the coals are mined, then becomes a backward diversification or integration. The forward diversification occurs when firms move closer to the consumer in terms of the production stages. So they're moving to the closer to the customer so that the distance to travel by the consumer is less. It is more visible. It is creating the right kind of impact on the customers as well. So diversification could be vertical or horizontal. It could be backward integration or a forward integration. Globalization. Now globalization is a coined word that we are speaking for the last 2 decades or so, but the word globalization itself has created new kind of waves in the way it impacts businesses. So it's a phenomena which permits mobility of factors of production across the globe except land. Now important point when we speak of globalization. In the process of globalization, product, people, service is moved to the customer. Land doesn't move because we know it's an immovable asset or immovable capital. So where the product moves, where the customer, where the services move, this is where globalization happens. It refers to a process of deepening economic integration, increasing economic and growing economic interdependence between countries in the world economy. Now, when we are speaking from a business environment perspective, globalization has a huge impact. So when we speak of elections in any countries happening, say for the example, US elections are on cards. Now those elections, although it's a political nature or political context for any country, but that also impacts companies who are operating in other countries. For the simple reason, with globalization, what has happened is we have become more interdependent on each other, where small changes affect the big changes. The economies have become more systemic, more interdependent and interrelated to each other. And hence, when we speak about globalization, we need to understand these dynamics about it. The nature of competition. Now, when we spoke about one, we spoke about the government control. The second, we spoke about diversification. Now we spoke about competition. If you say competition, now competition always existed, isn't it? It existed for many years, through many years when we run businesses. But the kind, nature, level, intensity, all has changed. So when we speak of competition, it could be monopoly. Now, monopoly is where we don't have any competition whatsoever. Or it could be duopoly. You have only one or two players in the market. Or it could be a monopolistic competition where one striving for the other. Or it could be oligopoly where there are many players seeking in the same market, wanting to make their presence felt. Now, every nature of business or every kind of competition exists a different force. Now, if you're operating in a duopolistic kind of environment, duopolistic is where only two players are there. Now, in a duopolistic kind of competition, we know that it's a zero-sum game. That means one's gain is some other's benefit, one's loss is some other's benefit, because the ratio might be 60-40, 70-30 based on the kind of players they are into. Although duopolistic kind of or the duopoly kind of competition we don't find these days, because very few market existed in this of duopolistic. We have more so of oligopolistic nature where there are many players marketing or playing in the same arena for the same product or the service. For example, let's take insurance. Now, insurance industry was classically run by in India with LIC or Life Insurance Corporation of India. Now, LIC was a monopoly till 1995 or 1997. Now, with the opening of the insurance industry or banking industry 15 years back, you find a lot of companies coming in with Indian partners in industry, because there was a government norm that you can't play it individually. So, for example, AXA, a UK insurance company, tied up with Bharti, the Airtel Bharti group, to form the Bharti AXA insurance. We have the Tata AIA, and there are so many players, or Aviva, or the Reliance insurance group. So what happens is the monopolistic order turns into an oligopoly. Now when we say of oligopoly, the nature, the kind of business, all changes in the market scenario. The business challenges. Now, when we look into these characteristics of businesses, the challenges also are different. Now, when we say one of the biggest challenge is managing bottom line. Now, friends, let me tell you, with so many business environment dynamics or parameters, one change it affects the company is going to affect the change. Now, if you want to, one thumb rule we look into is how are the bottom lines going to be managed, or how are the profits going to be sustained. Now they say that especially, or there are roughly around 10,000 startup companies that start up every year across industries. In India, I'm speaking of 10,000. Now they say within 3 years, 90% of these companies close down. I repeat, 10,000 startup companies start up in India every year. Out of this, the studies show that 90% of them close down within the first 3 years. Now, that is some statistics. Why? For the simple reason, if you don't have the economic engine to survive, you just don't exist. So for any organization, managing bottom line becomes a thumb rule, even to just exist in the industry. And if you're not growing in a business, it's simple, you're degrowing. Because with the, if suppose whatever you have, or if whatever income an organization has drawn last year and this year, if it is same, so technically speaking they might not have grown. But the point is, if you're not growing consistently for a couple of years, that is a sign of degrowth, because the other factors, that means inflation is picking up. That means the overhead cost, the expenses, the energy cost is going up. So with the same kind of revenue, we can't survive. And so very important to understand this. It is meeting stakeholders' expectation. Now we understand that the expectation of stakeholder. Now stakeholder here are the people who invest their money to run businesses in terms of their capital or revenue. Their expectations have gone up. Their ROI or return on investment they expect from the companies have gone up. Developing and retaining top talent. Now, to run a dynamic business, you need dynamic people. And when you think of dynamic people, the talent that organization want to retain so that they run the business efficiently have become a great task. So to retain them, so that's why in our HR lectures we have speak about, you might have heard about customer engagement, sessions on attrition or attrition management, perks and benefits, the flexi hours, and so forth has become important. Creating a customer responsive organization. So the focus also has become more centered around customer. So these days we don't speak about customer satisfaction. We speak about customer delight. How are you responsive enough to make changes based on the needs of the customer? And are you keeping this alive in the journey? It's diminishing time to market. Now, so very important to understand this dynamics. Now, suppose the company brings in a new product and they feel it's very new to the marketplace. Now, it could be a technological new thing, it could be an adaptation new thing, it could be a service. Now, when we speak about diminishing time to a market, that means that earlier the product used to be there in the marketplace for around 20 years, 30 years because the value it needs to bring in. But today, that newness, the time has reduced. That means they say every 10 years the information or technology is changing, and so is the products and service. You look at the mobile industry. Now every third day you find the telecom the mobile companies coming up with new gadgets. Now it could be an S5, T5, E5, whatever, with the newer versions, and you have brought a newer version 6 months. Just 6 months go by, the model is gone, and if you go for a spare part change, you will find that it doesn't exist or you struggle to get it. Yes or no? So the point is, the changes that are happening when it comes to diminishing time to market is getting narrower and narrower. That means if you are launching a product or a service in the marketplace, we need to design a strategy in such a way that the returns come fast. It is marketed well, the reach becomes faster. You need to penetrate deep fast as well. The time was there. For example, let's take Walmart. That was the number one company. Now Walmart, when it started in the 50s or close 60s, for 30 to 40 years, they didn't have a second outlet. I repeat, Walmart in the first 30 years, they didn't have a second outlet. The second outlet came after 30 years, and then now they've expanded around more than 1,000 outlets across the globe. Now that was an era that was different. Today, you need to diversify fast as well, to reach out fast, because we never know when the new technological wave is in the card. Because when a new technological wave comes in, the wave that you are riding might be too short or too less a time. So organizations are very clear about it. If they're starting off a new thing, they're also looking into that they ride the new wave in a right way so that the returns are there as well. Then the market agility. So when we speak of market agility, what does agile mean? Agile means proactive. They're sharp. They're fast. So market agility means that if the organization is having a product or service in a particular industry, it needs to be sensitive about what's happening around the marketplace. Is there something new coming up? Is there something that I can make a better version of it? Or can I at least copy the same model and integrate that with my current technology or product or service? So market agility has gone up, because if you're market blind, if you're not aware of what's happening you're not sensitive to the marketplace. The marketplace includes customers and competition both, then people become redundant very fast. You look at HMT, a big time manufacturers. They used to say that they are the timekeepers of the nation. Now this timekeepers the nation was the tagline. Now seriously, you need to question that. Where are the timekeepers? I mean, they're on the brink of getting redundant. So if you don't keep pace with the market that's happening around as well, companies become redundant very fast. They become obsolete very fast. The pricing and the quality. So when you might have discussed in your marketing strategies as well, the pricing has become important. Now when I say pricing, it's not only a one-point price. It means that at what pricing are you going to launch it? And at what price are you going to cut through or increase the price? You look at the competition as well, look at the market as well, you look into which demographics are you operating in. Now, all these are the business challenges that the organization looks into. So what do you mean by a business environment? So the environment of any organization, when we say, it is the aggregate or sum total of all the conditions, events and influences that surround and affect it. Now, characteristics of business environment are complex. Now, why we say complex? Because they are not single entities. They are kind of interdependent entities. They are dynamic as well. That means they are ever changing. They are multifaceted. When we say multifaceted, it's not in a single direction. It comes from a various angles as well, and it has far-reaching impact. So when we spoke about things like globalization, the market economics as well, liberalization as well. So they are far-reaching and deep penetrating as well. So if you want to define business environment, it is the environment of any organization with a sum total of conditions, events, the influences that surround and affect it. Why to study business environment? We need to look into that as well. Great. Why we need to study? Because of the development of broad strategies to ensure sustainability. Now, for any companies, it has become important that you need to survive and sustain in any market. And sustenance doesn't mean just existing. That means you need to continuously keep growing, because if you are not growing, we know that the bottom line that we spoke about, you are not generating profits. So if you want to keep sustaining yourself, you need different kind of strategies to apply based on the conditions. To foresee the impact of socio-economic changes at the national and international levels on firms' ability. Now, what business environment study gives you is, it gives you an aspect of forecasting. Now, students, you will understand, in today's market dynamics, forecasting business analysts have become a huge function to excel, because what forecasting does and comes through a background of business analysis is, it kind of gets into the picture, what is there in store based on the factors. It could be about the political influence, the social influence, the cultural influence, the legal influence, so on and so forth. It analyzes the competitors' strategies and formulation of effective countermeasures. So we know that we are also speaking about what kind of measures the competitors are going to take as well, and to keep oneself dynamic. They say in today's turning environment or changing environment, if we ourselves are not changing as an organization, we become a dinosaurs. We become redundant very fast. And we have found this happening with so many companies, that when companies don't adapt to changing environment, companies become obsolete. So when we speak about companies like HMT, as what I was referring to, or telegram office doesn't exist because other things have taken over. Classical landlines doesn't exist. Feature phones doesn't exist. Nokia as a company doesn't exist. So the reason why we are studying business environment is to foresee what's happening, design strategies, proactively draw strategies and act upon it as well. Now, types of environment. So when we say of business environment, what is environment? Environment is that exists in and around of the organization. So what kind of environment is there as far as the company is concerned? So one, we have an internal environment, and the other, we have an external environment. Now, internal environment and external environment, and we look into each of these. Now, when we speak of external environment, there are microeconomic factors or micro environment factors, and the other is a macro environment factors. Macro further has got economic and non-economic functions as well. So let's look into one by one. So one, the internal environment. Now, what does internal environment means? It refers to all the factors that are within an organization which impart strengths or cause weaknesses of strategic nature. So when we do a SWOT analysis for organization, SWOT standing for strength, weakness, opportunity and threat. Strength and weakness refer to the internal environment, the internal environment of the organization, the strength and weakness. The opportunity and the threat in a SWOT relates to the external environment, what exists outside, to which we can play our strengths and which we manage our weaknesses. The controllable factors this includes. Now, when we speak of environment, we need to understand that be it internal or external, the factors that the organization is concerned about, what they can control and manage. So very important to understand. And the controllable factors include: 1, the value system; 2, the mission and the objectives; 3, management structure and nature. Now, we kind of need to understand that not all factors we can control. So there's something called as the zone of control and influence. And there are 3 zones that any organization work in. Number 1 is a zone that they think they can control. The second is something that they can influence. And there's a third zone which we call it the zone of no control or no influence also. Now, the more the company focuses its attention on zone of control and zone of influence, the more chances it has to make an impact. Otherwise, there are certain factors which the company has no control about. For example, the political structure of a particular nation, organization really don't have much control about it, or a natural calamity about it, organization really don't have much control about it. So companies look into what they can control in the context is what companies look forward to, where they plan to make an impact. Now, when we say of components of internal environment, let's look into what are the elements that the organization has which they think are more manageable and controllable. 1, human resource. Now, resource are people, that means the employees, the internal customers. Company's image and brand equity, what kind of brand they want to build. That means what kind of brand name they are putting, the tagline they want to emphasize, what they want the customers to remember the brand as. So that depends on what kind of strategy you are laying. Other factors are the physical assets and the facilities, what kind of physical infrastructure the company has, or the R&D and technological capabilities, what kind of investment the company is making in as far as the R&D measures are concerned. The marketing resources, what kind of marketing initiatives the companies is putting in terms of making their product or services reachable to various areas. And the financial resources, what kind of financial backing the company has, what kind of stakeholders the company has to build a resource system. So these are the components of internal environment. Now, it has been said that the more you focus on what you can control more, makes much more sense to make an impact. And that defines about the internal environment. Now, the external environment includes all factors outside the organization which provide opportunities or pose threat to the organization. So strength and weakness are internal to the organization, but opportunities and threat is that exists outside its boundary. There are other uncontrollable factors as well that we discussed: natural calamities, elections. It consists of even the external factors has micro and macro environment, and we will look into this, the micro environment. So we are speaking over here. I just want to recap till now. What we have done so far is we're looking at the business environment, how we have defined business environment. We're also looking into how the environment impacts. Now it has the internal environment and external environment. External environment, we spoke about, that they consist about the human resource, the mission statements, their financial resources, systems that they employ, the R&D measures. The external environment still further is divided into two parts: the micro environment and the macro environment. So what is a micro environment? Now, micro environment consists of factors in the company's immediate environment that affect the performance of the company. Micro environment are in fact those factors which the company can influence, because they are very close as far as those environment is concerned. It's something that can influence the micro environment factors. The micro environment factors are: 1. Suppliers, consumers, marketing intermediaries, competitors, publics, and financial community. Now, these are the factors which the company is in touch with, or the company is in association with. So these factors, so we say that the internal environment of organization is something that they can lay their hands on, they can direct it and guide it. When we speak of external environment, the micro environment is the environment or factors which the company is very much in constant touch with, or there is an exchange of influence that happens at an immediate physical environment, and those are suppliers, customers, marketing intermediaries, competitors, publics, and financial community. Now let's look at as an example of a car manufacturing company, and it's a good it might look a bit haphazard to start off, but once we describe the nature of it, we'll make it more clear. Okay, so this is a car manufacturing company represented in this green circle. Now if you see their immediate physical environment: customers, car dealers, competitors, stakeholders, component suppliers, they become the first set of intermediaries. Although they are in the external environment, they're kind of very close to the environment, and this doesn't exist as one layer. They're further divided. Customers also has a reach to potential customers, car dealers to potential dealers, competitors for suppliers and for customers, stakeholders further local community, the pressure groups of the government, and the potential suppliers. So this forms the micro environment for a car manufacturing company, and a similar kind of nugget also exists for other kind of companies as well. So these are the micro environment factors. Let's look into the macro environment. Now, what does a macro environment mean in the context that we are looking at? Now, macro environment, it comprises general trends and forces that may not immediately affect the organization, but sooner or later will alter the way organization operates. Important to understand. I repeat this once again. Let's understand this once again. It says that what is a macro environment? Macro environment are the general trends and forces that may not immediately affect the organization, but sooner or later will alter the way organization operates. Now, all the macro environment factors are not in direct relation to the organization to start off, but they are kind of interrelated to each other from a different context. So macroeconomic factors could be economic or non-economic. So we divide macroeconomic also into two subvariants, the economic and the non-economic. So when we speak of economic environment, it means one, economic stages that exist at a given time in a country. So when we say of economic stages, it means what kind of GDP the company has, what kind of stability the company has as well. The economic system is adopted by a country, for example, the capitalistic, socialistic, or mixed economy. So the organization need to be aware of what kind of nature of the business exists in that country. The economic planning, such as the 5-year plans, the budgets, etc. The economic policies, for example, the monetary policy, the industrial policy, then the fiscal policies. Economic indices as the national income, the per capita income, the disposable income, the rate of growth of GNP, the distribution of income, the rate of savings, the balance of payment, etc. also influences these macroeconomic factors. The economic problems that the company exists, or also the functioning of the economy. So in economic factors and the macroeconomic factors we are dealing with, the macroeconomic factors further gets divided into economic and the non-economic factors. And the economic factors we saw, it could be the GDP, the financial planning, the budgetary allocation of funds, so on and so forth. The non-economic environment. The non-economic environment from a macro perspective means the regulatory environment. Means there are a lot of regulatory bodies or norms. For example, IRDA is a regulatory body for insurance, or SEBI for banking and monetary policy, RBI for the monetary policies. So where they go on to decide the valuation of money. The socio-cultural environment, the socio-cultural environment of the country that the company operates in. Now, social-cultural environment is something that a company can't influence, but it needs to adapt to that kind of influence. The demographic environment, what kind of the length and breadth of the country that exists, the terrain, the weather, the nature. The technological environment in terms of upgradation in terms of what kind of technological revolution the country is going through, or the political environment. We spoke about political environment includes, is it a stable government? Are election on the cards? What is the general mood of the public? Is the government stable, or is it a kind of mixed bench, or is it a government that has come forth through a collaboration? Now, all these factors does influence the macroeconomic factors. The non-economic environment also includes like cultural environment. So when we speak of cultural environment, it means the social customs and rituals and practices. Now, company needs to understand that any company can't just go against a particular norm of a country, because if it goes against the norm or a ritual, then people will not take it. They will have a severe distaste for it. So companies need to be sensitive about cultural environment. The lifestyle patterns. So a lot of the patterns that existed decades back, it changes. So the lifestyle patterns. The family structure. So earlier the structure was about combined families. Today we find nuclear families coming in. So if nuclear families are coming in, what kind of products to deliver, at what time, at what age matters. The role and position of men, women, children, and aged in the family society. So different cross section of gender, the age, also people need to look in. So hence census report becomes important. So when census are taken in India in every decade. So the last census was in 2011, and the next is lined up for 21. So a lot of companies, before they are launching maybe a different basket, a product or service, wait for the census report, because census report gives an idea about the male gender, the gender by distribution. It could be about the percentage of working population. It could be about the age-old population or non-working population or children population. Now all these statistics reveal some significant data which is significant to the business as well. The demographic environment. Now, what does the demographic environment gives it? The demographic environment gives an idea of growth of population, the age composition, the life expectancy, the sex ratio, the fertility and mortality rates, the interstate migration that exists. Now all these are subtle factors which the organization can't control, but being aware about it and being agile and sensitive to these data gives in methods to re-strategize, to be flexible and adopt a new plan based on this influence. The macro environment, when we speak about the technological environment. So in technological environment, it's about the source of technology, the technological development that exists, the impact of technology it has. Speaking of technology, say for example, if you're market blind, if you're technological blind, you know that today a lot of products or services have become electronic, digital, or net dependent. So you see the emergence of a lot of apps. You see the emergence of things changing. For example, education. was always considered to be a classroom education, isn't it? Now we find this kind of education as well, where we have an online electronic education, and that's why we speak about EMBA, isn't it? And E has not restricted only to education. We know in all sectors, vegetables has become E. So you need not go to a grocery store or a vegetable vendor to purchase even vegetables. It has also become E. Now, to being aware and sensitive about these technological upgradations are important. Otherwise, it becomes redundant very fast. The political environment, it means the political parties in power, the philosophy that the parties have towards running the nation. The regulatory environment, it means the constitutional framework, what does the constitution say, the policies related to pricing and foreign investment, policies related to the public sector, SSIs, development of backward areas, and control of environment population as well. Now these all factors influence the macro environment when we speak about the regulatory environment. Then we have also the international environment, wherein important factors that operate at a global level which have an impact on the organization are the growth of the world economy, the distribution of world GDP, the international institutions like IMF or WTO or ILO, economic relation between nations, what kind of relation the nations have between each other, the global human resource, nature and quality of skills, mobility of labor, the global technology and quality standards, and the global demographic patterns as well. Now these all factors influences the international environment of the company as well. Now WTO and its relevance for companies. Now when we say of World Trade Organization, now World Trade Organization is a huge body of organization coming under one umbrella to set norms about it. So the main guidelines of WTO are trade without discrimination. So there should be fairness about it. Growing market access, promotion of fair competition. Now the response of Indian government to WTO constitutes the following actions. One, the reduction of tariff, that's what the Indian government wants out of it. Opening Indian markets for global players, and that we have seen in insurance, banking as well. Rationalizing industrial licensing and removal of controls on the size of operations. WTO and its relevance to companies. Now what kind of relevance it has on the companies? One, the impact of WTO on the companies likely to include the following: increasing competition. Now when we see the foreign players coming in Indian market to operate, so you will find competition going up. Increasing competition, consolidation of activities in core competency areas, improvement in infrastructure to negate structural disadvantages, or shake out the minor players and mergers and acquisitions to gain global scale. So we have the bigger fish eating the smaller fish. So we look from the Indian context, we look into these dynamics as well. How are they going to impact it as well? So when you see an overview of the business environment, in a nutshell, you will find this. Center, you will find this is where the company exists, the smallest circle. Here we have an internal environment. And this internal environment, we have values, mission and vision, humans resources, company's image, brand equity. Now this is where the business happens. We have then the micro environment. The micro environment, as we discussed, are those factors that companies have some kind of connect to it, and those are, we saw suppliers, customers, publics, and marketing intermediaries. Then we also saw the bigger circle, that is the macro environment, the where the impact is long term, where it influences the company, and the influence are economic environment we saw and the non-economic environment. So we have the political and the government factors, we have the international factors as well, then we have non-economic factors like the socio-cultural factors, the natural factors, the demographic factors, and the technological factors. Now students, we need to understand that all these factors, although we are studying it separately to have a better understanding about it, but we need to understand that they are not as distinctly separate from each other. They are kind of overlapping at various levels, and they keep on interacting and engaging with each other. So when we say macro factors, they are also kind of interacting with each other very sharply as well. So now we look into the environmental analysis. So when we are looking from a perspective about how to impact, we will look into how through an environmental analysis it's going to impact it. So when we look at environmental scanning, so if we want to draw analysis, we need to scan about it. So when we do an environmental scanning, what does it mean? It means it's a process by which organizations monitor their opportunities and threats affecting their businesses is known as environmental scanning. So when companies are doing a SWOT analysis, they are scanning with the changing environment what kind of opportunities and threat exist with which they are going to interact, so that they can change, be flexible as well. So that's the SWOT analysis. There are a few other things as well that we do for analyzing the environment. It could be the pest analysis, it could be the SPESTLE or the STEEPLE. So STEEPLE, when we say, is a function of, is an abbreviated for S for social, T for technological, E for economic, E for environmental, P for political, L for legal, and E for ethical. Now, we would be, when we are seeing the, when we are learning business environment, we will be learning business environment by scanning business environment, isn't it? Yes. So when we are scanning business environment, we will scan each of these factors, be it social, technological, it could be economic, it could be environmental, it could be political, legal, or ethical. We'll be looking into in the forthcoming sessions. In fact, all the sessions that are being laid out, we'll be looking into each of these factors one by one, how they are going to impact business. So when we have the scanning parameters, we also have the Global Economic Competitive Index. Now what is this index? The World Economic Forum has ranked 139 economies in its 15-16 Global Competitive Report. Now it's a very important report which we can also figure out. In the overall competitiveness, India scored a passable 51st place. It's ranked notably ahead of Latin America, powerhouse like Brazil, which is ranked at 58, and way ahead of its neighbors like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, but behind China. Now Switzerland tops the chart and USA is on 4th position due to its economic instability from 7 to 10 phase. So it's on 4th. Switzerland saw the tops the chart as far as this list is concerned of global competitive index. Delhi tops this rank as far as the last survey it was done in 2010. Chennai cornered the second position in the list ahead of Mumbai, which dropped to third place from second position last year. Chennai's ranking improved back based on the technological revolution, particularly its educated workforce, logistics infrastructure, whereas Mumbai fall was primarily due to the worsening state of its physical infrastructure. Bengaluru is at the fourth place in the list, followed by Kolkata, Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Pune, Nagpur and Jaipur. Ahmedabad and Pune have emerged as the most competitive tier 2 cities in India. So when this data is available to companies can then, this is the demographic data, isn't it? Now these data they can use in which cities to invest more, because these are the cities where the economic growth is happening as well. So this scan was important. Now this is a small homework for you, and the homework is, please prepare a case study. Prepare an environmental threats and opportunity profile for Parle-G. Let's take Parle-G as an example. Why Parle-G? Because it's an age-old product, age-old company. The company exists for a good number of years. From 1920s the company exists. Please prepare environmental threat and opportunity for Parle-G. Prepare the strategic advantages profile for Parle. On the basis of the strategic profile, propose strategic alternatives for Parle products. List down the components of external, internal, environmental of Parle products and identify strategic needs and weaknesses. What you can do as a part of background studies, figure out Parle products. Go to the website, figure out, do a environmental scanning of the industry that it operates in, countries that it operates in, the product it has, the competitors it has, what kind of technological revolution has happened in the industry of biscuits. Make a good 2-3 page chart report and also write it down what strategies the companies needs to do with the scanning of the environment according to you. So if you're a marketing manager, if you're a CEO of the organization, what do you propose as strategic alternatives? So understand, friend, if we want to become future CEOs of any organization, we have to start thinking in that direction. So it's important to make a preparation in this line. So do drop a mail at ISBM as a case study of Parle products. Now, with this in the backdrop, what we are going to do is we'll take each macro factor, will be it an economic or non-economic, and study at some length of how each of these factors are contributing to the overall impact of the organization. So one of the first things that we are going to look into is the impact of politics and law. Since elections are on the cards, be it the US elections or the state elections that are happening currently at this point of time, right, be it in Chennai, Kerala, Assam, so with this and Puducherry as well. So let's look into the politics and law and the impact of this macroeconomic variable. So learning objectives would be to understand the importance of political and legal environments in both home and host countries to the international business executive. 2. To learn how governments affect businesses through legislation and regulation. To see how the political actions and countries expose firms to international risk. to examine the differing law regulating international trade found in different countries, and we'll also figure out to understand how international political relations, agreements and treaties can affect international businesses. So we'll look into from these angles as well. So one we look into from a political context. We will also look into the laws, because the policies becomes the laws, or politics leads to lawmaking for companies as well. So how these two factors are going to impact the business environment. So looking at the three segments: one, the home country perspective. So if the company is from a home country, how is that going to impact? Two, host country political and legal environment. Three, the international relations and law. So we look into each of these functional variable as we move on. The home country perspective. We look into how is the home country making a difference as well. Now we find that the major areas of government activities that are concerned to international business management are: number one, the embargoes and sanctions, the export controls, the regulation of international business behavior. Now, when we speak of any international business, it's important that sanctioning becomes very important to take sanctions to do business in a country. So apart from the WTO set rules, every government of a country has set rules about the industry, about maybe what percentage they can work on, how much they can penetrate, what kind of embargoes that we have. Embargoes we will discuss that as well in functioning of the organization. Now let's start with the first point: sanctions and embargoes. What are these? Now what are these? They are government sanctions, government actions that distort free flow of trade in goods, services or ideas for adversarial and political rather than economic purpose. Now there are certain industries that government takes full control of, and they would not want private sector contribution coming into that function. So let's take an example. Let's take, for example, defense forces. Now every organization will keep defense up to themselves, because it's being politically controlled and being nationally controlled. They don't want a private contribution in defenses. Yes or no? We have certain other markets as well. For example, railways. When we look at it from an Indian context, is only IRCTC or Indian Railway Ministry that solely controls it primarily. They don't have any intervention or any competition that it is given to private openings. So, and why this is the case? The reason being, a government needs to take into control measures like, suppose if the companies are coming into certain restricted areas, they might, because profit is the motive, and certain functions, they don't want to be profit oriented. They are important thrust areas for the government and the nation per se. Now this is something that they don't want no intervention, but there are certain other sectors where government has part regulation. For example, banking. Now banking, insurance, now there it is not wholly company owned. They have kind of opened up to private companies. So for example, in banking we have ICICI, HDFC, so and so forth, the Kotak Mahindra, Yes Bank. So is an insurance as well. So from a conventional LIC moved to other insurance companies as well. But still it has regulations through IRDA as far as insurance is concerned, or SEBI guidelines as far as banking is concerned, or RBI guidelines as far as banking is concerned. And sanctions tend to consist of specific coercive trade measures. So certain trade measures are being incorporated so that it serves the people as well. What are embargoes? Embargoes are typically broader in that they prohibit trade entirely. So embargoes are restricted zones or areas that the government lays sanction on, that this is not a no entry zone to do business. So it could be defense, it could be railways, or it could be part sanctions. It could be banking, insurance, it could be any other sectors as well. So embargoes are broader, the kind of prohibitory sanctions as well. The export controls. Now export controls, they are designed to deny or delay the acquisition of strategically important goods by adversaries. So when we speak about essential items, the government would not want complete control by only companies. The legal basis of export control varies in nations as well. So when we speak of law, it's not an outsourced to companies, isn't it? So the legal measure that it has. The most international businesses can be carried out under the NLR conditions, or no license required conditions. Majority of trade norms are of that kind, but there are certain reservations and sanctions or embargoes that are being applied on where it's a no entry zone. The export licenses are issued by the Department of Commerce for commodities whose export is considered sensitive. So when we speak of export, certain export items that the government thinks that they are kind of sensitive, for example, defense ammunition, or the technological sharing of defense infrastructure. It could be about the choppers, it could be about the technological know-how, sharing it with companies. It's a completely being kind of screened off area that the government might have a strict control on or being strictly regulated by. How an export license is issued. So now we are looking at a macroeconomic factor. So the companies need to understand, if they want to market a product anywhere, need to understand how to get an export license. One, specialist in the Department of Commerce match the exported commodity with the critical commodities list, the countries of destination and the recipient company. So every company have a list designed that these are the areas or functions that business could be done. Number one. Number two, which countries that they can go for, or which products that the company can receive from other companies outside the nation. So the companies need to find out these regulatory list or sanction list of the areas. The no concern exists in any one of the three areas, a license is issued. So if it's a no concern or a restricted zone is not there in any one of these three, then license is issued to do business. This process is carried out if the product or the recipient country is considered sensitive enough to understand the market dynamics. The new environment for export control, so this also keeps changing, and the new environment consists of focus of export controls on the third world. So we look into from the perspective of which world the country is operating in. Is it a third world country? A loosening of mutual bond among allied nations. So we're looking also that nations don't form a cartel so that they exploit the third world countries. So it's about gaining to different band of countries as well. The increased foreign availability of high-tech products. So when we look at from a technological integration process, we are looking at how technology can be taken at a grassroots level and not to be restricted at a particular cross-section of people or the country per se. The speed of change and the rapid dissemination of information and innovation around the world as well. The issue of equipment size as well. Implementation and enforcement of export control. Now, there are regulatory bodies that control and measure this. Those are export control are increasingly difficult to implement and enforce. That means execute it as well. The number of countries that are able to manufacture products of strategic importance has increased. Now, with the increase in globalization and with the increase in diversification of existing companies want to explore and reach out to other places and almost in all spheres as well. So that has become a challenge as well in terms of how to approve things. Products that are in need of control are developed and disseminated very quickly. So if it's a zone where it's of essential item or if it's of basic need, then things are passed very clearly. For example, if it's of wheat grain, it could be of a rice, a wheat, a bajra. If you want to import it, so it's being done very fast. It is difficult to control the transfer of technology and know-how. Now, if it is a pure product or service, it becomes easy. But if it's a intellectual patent or if it's a product which is not tangible, not visible, that's something that we cannot feel it, then that transfer, we call the technological know-how, that transfer is slightly difficult to measure and manage as well. The regulation of international business behavior. Now, we also look into how international businesses could be managed as well. Now, regulations on firms vary substantially among nations. Now, we need to understand that different nations have different regulatory bodies as well and different norms as well. Nations may employ boycotts to government business activities. Now, it might happen that the nation might not strive for it, that may be a boycott about it. So, companies need to understand these dynamics about it. Antitrust laws are a regulatory activity. Now, since we are speaking from a political context of it and political bodies are nominated or elected from the society, they can always pass a no trust motion if we are in opposition. So that's a political macro environment. Bribery. Now, bribery, corruption have been very much in the mainstream when we speak of the last couple of years when you speak of politics. Now, firms operating abroad are affected by laws against bribery and corruption to a great extent. Now, international businesses may bribe to counterbalance poor product. Now bribery comes in when you have some cuts to do, or some favorism or some biases to get installed. Quality to create a market for goods or to stay competitive within other firms. That's where bribery comes into picture. So we have, when we look into current political scenario across the globe, you find this happening. Be it a chopper deal, be it a coal, be it the Colgate scam. So lots of this are being found out as far as bribery is concerned. Host country. So one, we are looking from an international perspective, let's go from a host country perspective. Now when we speak of a host country, it means the political action risk involved varies widely from country to country. The economic risk as well. When we speak of the economic risk, it's about the less dangerous but more common, but still exist. Three types of political risk are involved. Those are: one, the ownership risk. That means exposed property and life. Two, the operating risk. That means the interference within the ongoing operations of a firm. Now, as the firm is functioning, the kind of risk involved, the operating risk. And the transfer risk. So, transfer is a limitation of the outflow of funds. It could be one of these. The political risk may involve confiscation. Now, if there is a risk of the policy itself, it might involve few things. That these are confiscation, wherein the government takes over of a firm without compensation to the owner. So, if the owner is doing some malpractices, the firm might be confiscated. Or expropriation. Expropriation is a form of government takeover in which the firm's owner are compensated. The firm might be taken over, but with some compensation is given. It is called as expropriation. Or it could be domestication. That means the government demands transfer of ownership and management responsibility, where the government takes over the running of business itself. So, political risk involved. The economic risk could be: one, exchange controls may be levied. Tax policies may be used to control corporation and their capital. Price control may employed to control prices of import products or services. So, when we say of import norms, could be leveraged on to get a better deal. So, when we speak of managing these political or economic risk involved, demonstration of concern with host country society need to be effective as well. Firms can take out insurance to guard against that kind of risk involved. The legal differences restraints, where countries differ in their laws as well as in their issues of law. These are two major systems. It means the common law or the code law, depending on the type they are operating on. The international relationships and the law as well. That means international politics. What kind of political scenario as well exists as well when we speak about in relation to each other. Or the international law. So there are a lot of international laws exist in this direction as well. When we speak of international law, the World Trade Organization defines international laws which lays guidelines and rules for it as well. And the Patent Corporation, the PCT, provides procedures for filing patent applications, or the United Nations has developed codes to ensure these laws as well. In case of disagreements, the parties can choose either for arbitration, that means procedures and quicker and often spelled out in original contract, or it could be litigation as well, which often involves extensive delays and very costly. So it could be arbitration or litigation. Great. So now in the first session of this business environment, what we have kind of recap and summarize it, we have defined what is business. We've seen what the environmental factors are. So one, it could be the internal environment or the external environment. External environment could be micro as well as macro. Micro are factors which the company is very much aware of, physically distant. Macro are much beyond that. It kind of casts an impression over a longer period of time. And we have also seen from the perspective of politics and law how these factors influence each